Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. There's a few people still trickling in, but that's totally fine. We'll get started. So welcome to today's webinar. We'll be going through bank feeds and wrap platforms as part of today's webinar. This webinar is also part of our Simple Fund 360 Education Week. My name is Damien. I'm part of the account management team here at BGL. Just before we get started, we'll also go through a bit of housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded. So all attendees will be in listen-only mode. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, there is a Q&A box that you'll be able to pop in your questions into there. And I've got a number of colleagues that will also be helping with answering those questions. So feel free to pop them in throughout the webinar, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can throughout the webinar. This webinar, like I said, is also being recorded. So the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, and all attendees will also receive a recording with that as soon as we do send that out to you too. So some of you may have joined some of our webinars this week. So we're in the middle of the week for Simple Fund 360. So we're going to be going through the bank feeds and wrap platforms. There's a number of sessions that are happening for Simple Fund over the next couple of days as well. So we'd love to see you at those webinars if you haven't already registered as well. With the Education Week as well, so we have Simple Fund running this week. And then we've also got Simple Invest 360 next week. And then we've also got CAS 360 in a couple of weeks' time as well. So if you haven't already, definitely keep a lookout for those sessions. We'll also share the link in the chat so that you can also register for those sessions too. So just to look at today's agenda, so we're going to be looking at the bank feeds module within Simple Fund 360. This also applies to Simple Invest as well. The process of the authority form process and getting that signed with the clients through that whole process, and also looking at the wraps and platforms feature within Simple Fund 360 and Simple Invest as well. So we do receive a number of questions relating to the bank feeds. So we thought that this webinar can hopefully help to cover a lot of those questions. So we're going to be touching on the supported banks that are included as part of the BGL Bank Data Service, how to re-request data. So if there is missing data in the fund or maybe a transaction has been accidentally deleted, how that can be re-requested. What happens once the bank feeds do come through into the software. And then also the authority process as well. So what's the requirements in terms of this signing of the authority forms? What do you do with those signed authority forms? How do you submit them to BGL as part of that process? And a little bit about the bank feed statuses too. Now, if you don't currently have the BGL Bank Data Service, just to touch on a little bit about the pricing behind it. So it is $40 per fund per annum plus GST. So if you don't currently have a subscription for the bank data service, that is the cost. There is a minimum of 5 funds if you do take up the service, but upgrades after that are increments of 1 fund thereafter. So if you're currently managing, let's say 26 funds, you can pick and choose which funds that you would like to have the BGL Bank Data Service set up. You don't have to set it up for all funds. If a fund is set up on the BGL Bank Data Service, it does take up a spot in your license. You do have unlimited bank accounts as part of that. So let's say if a fund does have 5 bank accounts, that takes up 1 spot in your BGL Bank Data Service still. Okay. And similarly as well, it is unlimited transactions and also balances, bank balances for the supported banks as well. So what we'll do is I will just jump into and give you an overview of the supported banks. So if you're not familiar, this is one of our help articles on the Knowledge Centre. And this is a great article that does summarize the BGL Bank Data Service and the supported banks. So I'll just slowly scroll through the screen and I'll give you an understanding of how it works. So all of the supported banks are on the left-hand side, including the big 4, Macquarie and some of the other common banks that are the large institutions. Most of them do require an a authority form, except for Westpac that does have an online authorization process. Digital signing, some of the banks have started to adopt digital signing as part of that process. So you will be able to refer to this article to see whether or not the bank does support it. For most of the banks that do support digital signing, so including Bendigo, Macquarie, and NAB, there is additional signing requirements, such as including the certificate of completion. So each of those help articles do indicate what the financial institution does require if the authority forms are digitally signed. And then we've also indicated the types of accounts that are supported. So whether it's a normal account, term deposits, and loan accounts. So this article does summarize the types of accounts that are also supported. Typically, everyday transaction accounts are supported. Each of the help articles do indicate further details around that. One thing to note is that most of the banks do not provide historical data. And what that means is when you have gone through this authority process and the bank has successfully accepted and processed the authority form, they will only start to send the bank fee transactions to BGL and the fund within the software from the approval date. Okay, so it is important to understand that if you set up the form today and send it to the client for signing, and it comes back within, let's just say, the next couple of days, we'll go through this step as well. But once the bank has processed it, the data feeds will only start to flow through from that particular date, except for a few banks that do provide some historical data, such as DDH Graham, as we can see in the help article, Macquarie Bank, and also Rabobank too. Okay, so this help article is designed to provide you that summary so that you can see it very quickly, but the individual help articles, such as this one here for NAB, do indicate the further details regarding the setup as well. Just to touch on what I was explaining before regarding digital signing. So NAB is one of the banks that do allow digital signing of the authority forms. However, we do mention here the requirements on behalf of NAB, just so that the process is correctly completed and the client is not hassled too much as well. So we'll jump into Simple Fund 360. So I'm currently in our feed management screen here, which is available within the Connect menu on the left-hand side, and then feed management from the side panel. If you're not familiar with this screen, I'll just give you a brief overview. So we do have a number of tabs along the top here. So we've got the entity summary, which is the entity that's currently being worked on. We have the 3 different types of data feeds for the fund that is set up here. But we do also have a global tab for each of the services too. So this allows you to be able to look at the funds across the board within your license and see what the status of the bank feeds are across those funds. We do also have a number of filters here along the bottom too. So these are really helpful to making sure that the forms that need to be followed up can be followed up here, and the statuses of those data feeds. So what we're going to go through now is setting up the bank feeds within the software. So this is a common question that we receive, how to set up a fund as bank account for the BGL Bank Data Service. So over here, I've got one of the funds that is currently appearing. So it is an ANZ bank account. So any of these bank accounts that are attached to the fund in the chart of accounts will appear within the bank feed screen. So over here, we'll be able to click on the setup button. This information, again, is just pre-filled from the chart of accounts, which includes the BSB and account number. And what we would do is to select the BGL Bank Data Service. So if you don't have that option, or if it's in gray, it's because you may not have sufficient spots or the service currently added to your license. So that upgrade can be processed through My BGL. But this is the correct process to set up the authority process. So once the feed provider has been selected, there is the option here to be able to print the form. So BGL and the software does all the hard work for you. Don't have to worry about manually filling in the forms. these are all pre-populated with the information that is available within the fund or entity in Simple Fund 360. So we've got all the information here, and it also includes the trustees that would also be signing off on the authority form. This is also picked up from the fund relationships tab of the SMSF or entity. If the entity does have multiple account holders, every bank is different. For example, ANZ does require 2 account holders to sign off on the authority form. You can change the name as long as it does match one of the account holders with the financial institution. So this is pre-filled with the first 2 that are picked up from the entity relationship screen, but you can override it if an alternative set will be signing off on them. Now, just a note with these as well. So the process is to print the authority form, and the client, usually in most circumstances, does need to physically sign the authority form. Now, when they are signing the authority form, it is also important to make sure that they sign it the same way that the signature is recorded on the financial institution's end. So when the account most likely was set up. If they have the long version of a signature, for example, they need to make sure that the long version is what is on here, not any abbreviations or initials or anything like that, as the financial institutions are quite strict in making sure that the correct authorization has been received. Again, this is a very common question that we do also receive in the support team and various teams, whether digital signing is allowed. And just to recap, so with the help article that we had earlier, so most of the banks do not accept digital signing or digital signatures. So just make sure that you do refer back to this help article. Some of your clients may return one where it has digital signed. If that is the case, it will be rejected by the financial institution if it is not supported through here. Okay, so it's very important to make sure that the form is physically signed. As a tip, a lot of clients usually ask me as well, what's the best time to be processing these? Any time is always the best, but maybe when the financial statements are being signed and when you're having that discussion with the client, it is a great time to be discussing the data feeds. We do have also a number of supporting documents relating to the BGL Bank Data Service, as we take data privacy very seriously and want to make sure that the data is held securely too on our platforms. Now, once this authority form has been signed, the client will then return that back to you. So you can print this out and send it to them by mail if they don't have, for example, a printer, or you can email it to them and they can print it out and mail it back to you. If they send you a scanned copy of the signed form, that is usually acceptable as well, but it's always best to try and have the original copy. But the electronic version of it is uploaded into the software, which we'll go through now too. Okay. So once you do save the setup, the status of the bank feed will go to awaiting signature. So that's for the client to sign that authority form. And what will happen is then once they have returned the signed authority form to you, is you will click on this option here to upload the signed authority form and upload a copy of the signed PDF. Now, once you do upload it here, the banks do take about 10 to 15 business days to process it on their end. Sometimes it can be a little bit nervous if they're taking a little bit longer, but our team does make sure that we follow up if it does exceed that period. So definitely if there are any forms that are uploaded here, yeah, it does take 10 to 15 business days to be processed. So just keep that in mind as well if you don't see the status flick through immediately. Once it has been uploaded, the status will then update to send to bank, and that means that BGL is in the process of sending the bank the authority form on your behalf. So you don't need to worry about sending the authority form directly to the bank. The signed copy can be uploaded directly into the software, and BGL will follow through with the rest of the steps with the relevant financial institution. Now, once the authority form has been processed by the bank, you will start to see the transactions flowing through into the software. So if I go into our transaction list, we can start to see some of the bank feeds that are actually flowing through in here. So from here, these will be an automated data feed flow that is the service. So sometimes the banks do take up to 24 to 48 hours to send transactions through to BGL. We do, as soon as it is received by us, especially overnight, those transactions come through into the software automatically. So all of those transactions do appear here within the screen. So we can see here a number of transactions that have come through, some of which, for example, the most recent one is the 30th of September. These are a demo set of data, but just to give you a representation of what those data feeds will look like once they do come through into the software. We do also receive balances for most of the banks, so that helps you to reconcile the balances between Simple Fund 360 and the feed provider. Some of those reports that can also be reviewed, or the balance review screen, and also the fund dashboard, which can show any sort of variances between Simple Fund 360 and the relevant institution. As an example on here, we can see that the ledger balance in Simple Fund matches what NAB has also displayed on their end too, with $1.64. If there is a discrepancy, it would appear in red, but that would also appear on the reports too. Now, if, for example, you have accidentally deleted some of the transactions that have come through from the bank feed, they can be re-requested. So back in our Connect menu and the feed management area, what you can do is, for any of the banks that are already operating with the bank feeds, is to click on the checkbox on the left-hand side and then click on the re-request data. So from here, you've got the option to import the date that you don't want any transactions to be imported before. So it might be the start of the financial year, for example. The do not load after date is in case there's any transactions after that period that you don't want to import. Normally that can be left blank otherwise. And then you can click on the re-request button to receive those transactions. If the bank feeds have already been received in the fund, in Simple Fund 360, they won't duplicate if that period overlaps and there are some transactions that are already in the fund. But otherwise, what will happen is any missing transactions will be re-requested from the BGL Bank Data Service, and they will flow through into the fund. Just as a reminder again with this as well, so the re-request function is for transactions that have already been received by the BGL Bank Data Service. So anything that happened prior to the bank account being authorized with the relevant financial institution, unless the bank does provide historical data, that historical data from the bank itself wouldn't be received. So this is just only for transactions that are received from the institution to the BGL Bank Data Service. That's a little bit about our BGL Bank Data Service. Next, we're going to touch on the wraps and platforms. This is the providers that are currently supported within Simple Fund 360 and Simple Invest 360. We'll also touch on how to set up those wrap feeds and seeing how those transactions, when they do come through into the software. Now, the first thing to touch on with the wraps and platforms is that this is a free service. So for any clients that obviously have Simple Fund 360 or Simple Invest 360, there is no additional charge. These data feeds are free and are included as part of the service. So what we're going to do is, on the screen here, we've got, similar to the BGL Bank Data Service, we have a list of the wraps and investment platform providers that are currently supported on the platform. Some of the most common ones are BT Panorama, Hub24, Macquarie Wrap. So we've got these listed out here on the screen. So there is quite a few different providers that are supported as part of this service. Premium is also another common one. So there is quite a number of providers that are supported as part of the service. We do also include whether it is an automated or manual data feed. If it is a manual data feed, maybe because the financial institution hasn't currently got the ability to send automated transactions to us, but BGL is always working with the providers to make sure that we do increase the number of supported automated ones within the software. With the wraps and platforms, they do include the investment, income, and bank transactions for most majority of them. But again, this table does summarize if some of those institutions or providers only provide some of that data. So as an example, BT Panorama does provide cash, investment, and income transactions, so all three. Unlike the BGL Bank Data Service, some of these providers do usually provide historical data. That means from potentially from inception of the account being opened up with that particular provider as well. Each of the articles do go through and indicate, for example, if historical data is available. Sometimes the providers will only send it from a particular period of time. So again, similar to the BGL Bank Data Service, the individual help articles can be referred to in order to determine whether that is supported or not. Now, with each of these providers as well, some of them can be authorized at a client level. So the client can send a request to the provider to authorize a data feed to come through to BGL. But sometimes it does require the advisor of the account to authorize that data feed. So I've got an example here of the BT Panorama help article opened up. So it does send us the different types of transactions and historical data. And like we mentioned before, the authority process. So this one, as an example, the client can authorize it with BT Panorama directly to provide BGL with the data feed. But there is also the option where if they do have a BT Panorama advisor, that the advisor can complete this process as well. So each provider has a different set of instructions, but you can refer to the help article to make sure that you're following the correct steps, as each of them are different from one another. Now, if we jump back into the feed management screen again, so down the bottom here, I've got an account set up for the BT wrap already. So if I go into here, so within here, we can set up the feed provider. So any of the wraps and platform providers that were in the help article, you would first select the correct provider that the client has an account with. Entering the account ID. So this is the number of that portfolio code with the provider. From here, we can select the main bank account that is attached to the entity and the portfolio as well. The advisor code here is only relevant if there is an advisor as required as from the help article. These can also be attached in the provider settings, which we'll go through shortly. And then from here, we've also got the option to input the date that we don't want transactions to be imported in. So if the fund has create entries or has this date input, the data feeds are not usually imported, but it is important to ensure that this is entered in, particularly as many of the wraps and platform providers do provide historical transactions. So it is always important to make sure that this is filled in, just so that you don't have transactions duplicate for previous years if there isn't create entries already completed too. Now, one other thing to also note is that some of the providers do also have account mapping. There's an option to complete that within the software here. This is helpful to ensure that accounts are not duplicated, but it is important to complete that authority process first. And there is sometimes the option to be able to produce a holdings report from within this screen here once that authority process has been completed. And that can help with the account mapping, just so that the transactions from the wrap or platform provider is flowing through to the correct account within Simple Fund 360 or Simple Invest 360 here. Now, just a couple of other things on the screen as well. So another common question that we do also receive is, how do I know which funds are taking up a spot in the BGL Bank Data Service? So with that question, what you can do is from the advanced options and reports screen, is to export a copy of the license report. And with the license report, the export of the data from within Simple Fund 360 will indicate whether a fund is taking up a spot within the BGL Bank Data Service. So it will be indicated in column E, either with a Y or N for yes or no, and then how many accounts are currently supported with that. So this can also help with reconciliation, as a number of firms do also expect that cost to be reimbursed or dispersed back to the client. So you can use this report to complete those disbursements, but also to determine which funds or entities are taking up a spot within the license. And this does also include the share data pack if you do have any funds on that service as well. Now, just one last thing to touch on as well. So for those clients that are familiar, there is a new process coming out shortly as well in terms of open banking as well. So what we've gone through today is the authority process. So it's creating an authority form and the client to manually sign off on that authority form. But open banking is also in the process of coming out. The product team is in the process of developing that to be supported within the software. If you are interested in that process, you are more than welcome to use the feedback button within the software to submit your request as part of the beta. If you would like to have some clients going through that process, that's really valuable, especially for some of the financial institutions that are not supported on the help article here. The open banking system may support a data feed with those relevant institutions. Some of them, for example, is Suncorp, which is a commonly requested bank. So if you are familiar with the BGL Bank Data Service or you would like to participate in the beta, please use the feedback button and express your interest in being part of the open banking process, and we can review that request too. So that does bring us to the conclusion of today's webinar on the bank feeds and wraps and platforms. So hopefully that has helped with making sure that you are able to automate the data flow of transactions into the entity within Simple Fund 360. We'll remain on the session. If you have any questions, please do pop them into the Q&A panel. Yeah, if you don't have any other questions, or if hopefully that's helped. But yeah, we hope that you have a great rest of the day. And just a reminder again, we have posted a link in the chat. So if you do, yeah, please do register for the education week. There are a number of webinars that will be run over the next couple of days still for Simple Fund, and over the next couple of weeks with some of the other products as part of the BGL product suite. But thank you very much for your time today, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.